Joining us now is Joe Murray. Joe is running for Queens District Attorney as a Republican. He's a former Democrat. Hey, Joe, great to have you with us.
Hey, good morning, Godzilla. Thanks for having me on there.
Well, Joe, they call you Fighting Joe Murray. We've got our own Fighting Joe here in Virginia, Fighting Joe Morrissey. You're a 52-year-old lawyer. You're former NYPD. You're a Democrat on a Republican line. How did this happen?
You know, it's just amazing. My life has just been incredible. You're correct. Yes, I am a retired New York City police officer. I was hired in 1987, and I'm sure you remember what that was like. In 1987, I was assigned in Midtown Manhattan, and Times Square was an absolute cesspool.
Was that during Mayor David Dinkins?
Well, actually, I got hired under Mayor Koch, and then Dinkins took over, and then Giuliani came in, and that's when the real transformation took place.
But I tell you what, lived and worked in New York for some time. I was a Koch fan. I mean, I thought he did a lot of good things, but towards the end there, things crime-wise got out of hand. But then when Mayor Dinkins came in, Joe, that was a disaster. I mean, you could literally not walk down the street, Joe. It
was horrible. We have record-setting homicide rates. I mean, we were 2,500 homicides a year in New York City, and now we have less than 300. It's amazing the transformation that took place, and it began with Mayor Giuliani bringing in Commissioner Bratton, Jack Maple. We strategized. We got smarter. We worked harder, but worked smarter, and reduced crime, broken windows, which works, and it's so vilified today, and that's something that clearly sets me apart from my adversary. She doesn't want to prosecute any low-level offenses, any misdemeanors, and I got to tell you, it's just shocking. The difference between me and my opponent are just shocking, and things that are happening here in New York City is what drove me to throw my hat in the ring. The Democratic primary was a race to the left. Who could be more left and try to win the primary nod? They want to close Rikers Island. You know what Rikers Island's like. Mm-hmm. We are the laughing stock of the country, of all big cities. We actually have an island where we keep all our jails. That's the perfect scenario. No one's ever escaped, and we keep them out of the neighborhoods. They want to close it and build neighborhood jails. It's
Why?
Insane. It's just absolutely insane. I can't get a straight answer. They say it's violent, it's decrepit, so let's fix it. It doesn't make sense.
I mean, everybody knows Rikers Island is not a place you want to go, right? It's horrible.
But jail should not be a place where you want to go.
Right,
you want to
dangerous.
Leave there and say, I never want to go back, you
right.
know? But the Brooklyn Detention Center is more dangerous than Rikers Island. Nobody's yelling to close the Brooklyn Detention Center. Every time I go there to visit a client, there's a lockdown, there's a lot of violence in there. But nobody's, calling out to close Brooklyn.
Why?
So it's crazy. I don't understand what's going on. I suspect there may be some corruption going on. Somebody wants use of this land and have approached the mayor. I mean, it's entirely possible. It's something that I think someone needs to investigate. But it makes no sense to close Rikers Island, which houses not all of them, but predominantly most of our jail detainees there, and they're not in the neighborhood. And now they want to close it and put them in the neighborhood. It's just insane.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that it is on an island. There's never been an escape from there ever. In history of Rikers Island, you can't escape. So, I mean, you want everybody to get due process or whatnot. We understand it's not a particularly pleasant place to be. We get that. But jail should be a deterrent, right? You don't want to go back. And
exactly.
Obviously, now there's got to be some upgrades made because it still has to be humane and things like that. And I understand from talking to people that one of the biggest problems in there is the smell. Is just like you can't. It knocks you over. Just the body odor and everything else. That they've got some old buildings in there that just has to get cleaned up. So put the money in it and do that. But, Joe, tell me about this race. I mean, you're in Queens. You're a Democrat running on the Republican line. How do you be competitive in this race?
Well, see, The
running for
issue
DA.
Running for DA. The issue here is that the borough president is my adversary in this race. She has absolutely no criminal justice experience. Although she is a lawyer, she's been an elected official, in the public sector for 20 years. She's never really practiced. She's never represented a client. She's never prosecuted anything. I don't even know if she's ever been inside the criminal courthouse. And with all the new laws that are coming into effect, January 1, for example, there's no cash bail, which I think is the most ridiculous thing. This no cash bail takes effect January 1st, which means about 2,000 people are going to be released from detention, Rikers Island, not going into a neighborhood jail. They're being released, and they're going back out into the community, which is insanity. Now, the burden is going to be on how do you prosecute these cases, because the reason why they were given bail in the first place is because they're a flight risk. Mm-hmm. And why are people a flight risk? Because they have a warrant history where they failed to appear in the past, or they have multiple crimes or offenses. And because they're facing, more time, these people are now considered more of a flight risk. So they give, more bail assigned to it, and based on the type of crime. So January 1, when 2,000 people are released and the new prosecutor has to prosecute these cases, or the bail jumping that, is apparently going to happen, they're going to warrant and not show up, things like that. I mean, what is she going to do? She has no experience. On top of that, we have another new statute coming into effect, which I support the intent of it, because as a criminal defense attorney, one of the issues that we struggle with the DA's office is disclosure, discovery. Mm-hmm. It takes forever to get proper discovery. And I'll give an example. I had a homicide case in Staten Island. 8 months into this thing, I was still fighting with the prosecutor to get very basic discovery, 911 calls, things like that. So, yes, I'm glad the legislature got together and they enacted a statute to expedite discovery, but they changed it to 15 days. 15 days is insanity. As a police officer, I know what goes into making an arrest and investigations to get all that material together. We're talking about chain of custody documentation as well, like any evidence you take in, where it gets passed along, if it goes to the lab, if it's examined and tested. All of that chain of custody documentation has to be turned over in 15 days. It's just not workable. So, there's a lot of things that are going to change January 1st. There's no room here, to just get on-the-job training. So that's one of my biggest concerns. And also, she's a politician. She doesn't want to be DA. She was term limited out of office. She's the borough president. The people have decided term limits are in effect. You need to move on.
Right.
She needs another job. So this is just her looking for another job. And where's she going to go from here? She's going to look for mayor or something else. So my fear is a prosecutor should never be a politician. A prosecutor needs to follow the evidence, not the crowd.
Right.
And someone like Melinda Katz, who's looking for higher office, doesn't know anything about being a prosecutor, is going to look to just appease the crowd and satisfy all the big, and not the majority, but you know how it is, the loudest criers. She's going to be, pulled further and further to the left. Here's a perfect example. The borough prosecutor, Eric Gonzalez in Brooklyn, and the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, filed a lawsuit against ICE to prevent ICE officers from coming into the criminal court to arrest people there. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of, because think about it. When someone goes into court, they go through metal detectors. There's court officers all around. There's security there. If you're going to apprehend someone, that's the best place to apprehend someone. Now, their logic is flawed, because they're saying, well, when you have ICE officers coming into court, it deters people who are witnesses and victims from cooperating, who might not be citizens. Yes, that's a legitimate concern, and I encountered that as a police officer, trying to get people who are undocumented, who are victims and also witnesses of crimes, to participate. But think of what the remedy is. They want ICE to go into the neighborhoods and apprehend these people, which would be more violent, number one, so you're subjecting the public to more harm. And number two, those victims and witnesses live in the neighborhood.
Right.
So how would this change anything? It's really just, again, like I talked about, it's politics, it's pandering, and that's why I'm running. I don't believe a prosecutor should be doing that.
Now, you're a Democrat, but you're a supporter of President Trump. Explain that one.
Well, I'm a Democrat primarily for labor. I come from a labor union family. Republicans, unfortunately, are not very pro-labor and pro-union. And I'll just, even Mayor Giuliani, as much as I loved him and the things he did, I was protesting Giuliani with the union. I had signs, zeros for heroes. He would give us nothing in our raises, which was horrible. So I am more conservative, but I believe that, the Democrats, at least locally, are more labor-friendly. But I got to tell you, I was much more involved in the Democratic Party. I was a vice president of my local club. I am just so disgusted as to what happened to this party, and I am not long for this party. Seeing everything that's going on, particularly with Donald Trump. And the part I loved about him is he's not a politician. I can't stand politicians. These career politicians that talk out of both sides of their mouths. It's disgusting. They lie to you, and I'm so sick of them. And when it came up to Hillary Clinton, I was like, absolutely not. There was no way I could support her. Donald Trump, I loved his common sense approach. When he talked about the trade deals, he goes, I'm not going to hire ambassadors who are just political patronage. I'm going to get Wall Street wolves down there to negotiate trade deals.
Right.
Like all of his platform was common sense, taking on, the tough thing issues like North Korea. He brought home the remains of the North Korean war soldiers who died over there. Nobody gives him credit for the things he's doing. He's really, I just think, a very common sense approach. He goes to NATO. Hey, you guys aren't paying up. What a president in the past has really taken them on and confronted people with our American interests?
No one.
So that's what I loved about him, and I still love about him.
All right, we're with Joe Murray. Joe is running for Queens District Attorney in New York City, Queens. Of course, for those that are not from the New York area or New York like me, Queens is one of the 5 boroughs that make up New York City. He's running for DA in Queens against the term-limited borough president, Katz. And he retired from the NYPD in 2002. Interesting story, Joe, if I can tell it on your behalf. You got into an altercation with another officer. You had a fight with him. You decided to represent yourself in that case. And as I recall, the judge said you should be a lawyer and go to law school. And so you stopped being a cop in 2002 and graduated from CUNY Law School in 2006. Here's the reality. Out of 1,000,003 registered voters in Queens, 850,000 are Democrats, 136,000 are Republicans. I'm not making this up. Out of 1 million voters, out of 1,000,003, 300,000 are independents, 850,000 are Democrats, and a mere 136 are Republicans. How come there's only 136,000 Republicans there? That's so bad.
It's sad too, and the Republican Party here is fraught with so much internal conflict. It's actually sad, and I didn't realize how frayed they were. Joanne Ariola is the Queens County chair, and she's doing what she can to bring it together. And I've been speaking to other people involved, Vicky Palladino in the Whitestone area. They're just at war with each other, and I'm hoping to, at least for this, purpose here, to try to just bury the hatchet, come together. We can win this. And as much as those numbers are very impressive and intimidating, let me just tell you, in the primary, the Democratic primary, and this was probably one of the most publicized Democratic primaries because we had the Democratic Socialist candidate, Tiffany Caban, in a neck-and-neck race with the Queens County Machine candidate, Melinda Katz. Even with all the high-profile nature of this primary, they both just got 35,000 votes. Like you pointed out, there's 731,000 active Democrats. They got 35,000. That tells me that people are just not happy with either one of them.
And Katz beat the socialist candidate, right? That basically wanted to. She said she wouldn't prosecute any misdemeanors. She said she wouldn't prosecute people that jumped the tolls. She was going to basically let out the jails. That was the one, right?
And I essentially, and I'm saying this just tongue in cheek, she wanted to lock up cops and ICE agents. That's really who she wanted to lock up. She didn't want to lock up criminals. She'd rather go after law enforcement. So, and don't kid yourself, so is Melinda Katz. Melinda Katz was pandering and going so far to the left to try to win this thing, and she won by 55 votes under very suspicious circumstances where, we had absentee ballots that had to be counted, but there's something in New York that we use, affidavit ballots, and essentially affidavit ballots are newly registered people who come to the polls and their names aren't in the register. So they sign an affidavit saying that, yes, I am, in fact, a registered Democrat. I'm here to vote, and here's my vote. So when they opened them up, I believe there were at least 60 of possibly 100 that were thrown out because of something that was incomplete or completed incorrectly on that form. Instead of looking at the intent of the voter, they knocked it out on some other technical grounds. So, that it's very shady the way things go on here. And that's one of the things I want to do. I want to come in there and just
you want to clean it up, Joe. Fighting Joe Murray wants to clean up Queens, and he deserves your backing. Clean up Queens, Joe. All right, that's people want more info, Joe. Where do they go?
I have a website, www.joe4qda.com. And on Facebook, the same thing. It's Joe4QDA. So I have a fundraiser tonight at Russo's on the Bay. A lot of people coming down to support me, both Republican and Democrat. There's something for everyone in my campaign. Like you said, I'm a Democrat. I support Donald Trump. I'm a police officer.